this video may not be available for long. Stop everything you're doing, because what you're about to discover could change the way you see life, death, and everything in between. What if everything you've been told about death is a lie? What if, instead of being an end, death is just another transition, one that has been mapped out in detail for over 1,000 years? The Tibetan Book of the Dead is not just an ancient manuscript, it is a guide to what happens the moment you take your last breath. It provides step-by-step instructions for navigating the afterlife, escaping the cycle of rebirth, and achieving ultimate liberation. But here's where it gets even more shocking: modern science, with all its technological advancements, still cannot answer the fundamental question: what happens when we die? The Tibetan Book of the Dead, a map for the afterlife. For over 1,000 years, Buddhist monks and spiritual seekers have turned to the Tibetan Book of the Dead, also known as the Bardo Thödol, as a sacred manual for death and rebirth. Unlike Western traditions, which often view death as an abrupt ending, Tibetan Buddhism sees it as a doorway to another state of existence. The text describes, in astonishing detail, the stages of consciousness after death and how a person's awareness can either become enlightened or fall back into the cycle of reincarnation. More importantly, it does not treat death as something to fear. Instead, it teaches that by understanding death, we can also understand life. But this book isn't just about preparing for the end. It presents a radical idea, that consciousness does not die when the body does. Instead, it moves through different realms, encountering divine visions, confronting deep fears, and ultimately facing the possibility of rebirth, challenging modern science's understanding of death. Despite all the advances in neuroscience, quantum physics, and artificial intelligence, science still struggles with one of the most profound mysteries of human existence: what happens after we die? Scientists can measure brain activity. They can observe the biological shutdown of the body. But they cannot explain what happens to consciousness. Many people who have had near-death experiences, NDEs, describe traveling through tunnels of light, meeting otherworldly beings, and feeling an overwhelming sense of peace. Strikingly, these accounts match descriptions found in the Tibetan Book of the Dead, written long before modern medicine could revive people from clinical death. Could it be that ancient wisdom had already uncovered truths that modern science is only beginning to explore? Why this knowledge still matters today? The idea that death is not the end, but rather a transition, is more than just spiritual philosophy. It has profound implications for how we live our lives. If death is just another state of consciousness, what does that mean for how we face fear? If our awareness continues beyond the body, how should we prepare for that journey? What if mastering the process of dying is the key to living a more meaningful, fearless life? This book does not just describe death, it teaches us how to embrace life with clarity, purpose, and awareness. But to understand its full power, we must first explore its core teachings, the three Bardos. Why this book still matters today. Science has mapped the human body, decoded DNA, and explored the furthest reaches of space, yet one question remains unanswered: what happens after we die? For centuries, humanity has sought answers, but despite all technological advancements, modern science is no closer to explaining what lies beyond death than the people of ancient Tibet were 1,000 years ago. This is where the Tibetan Book of the Dead stands apart. Unlike theories and beliefs that only speculate, this book claims to map out the afterlife, offering a guide to navigating the transition between death and rebirth. And here's what makes it even more fascinating: many of its descriptions match modern near-death experiences, NDEs, reported by people who have been clinically dead and revived. The mystery that science still can't solve. Despite all our medical progress, we still do not fully understand consciousness. Science can track brain activity, measure the body's physical decay, and even artificially extend life, but it cannot explain what happens to the mind when the body dies. Is consciousness just a byproduct of brain activity, or does it exist independently? If the brain shuts down, why do so many people experience vivid awareness during near-death experiences? Why do thousands of people from different cultures describe similar events, seeing a bright light, encountering spiritual beings, or feeling an overwhelming sense of peace? For years, scientists dismissed NDEs as hallucinations caused by a dying brain. but recent studies suggest that something far more profound may be happening. If the experiences of the dying align with the teachings of the Tibetan Book of the Dead, could it mean that ancient wisdom uncovered truths we are only beginning to understand? A book that has fascinated monks, mystics, and scientists alike. For over 1,000 years, Tibetan monks have studied and practiced the teachings of the Tibetan Book of the Dead. They do not see death as the end, but as a journey that can be navigated with awareness and preparation. But it is not only monks who find this text compelling. Mystics, philosophers, and even modern scientists have taken interest in its radical claim that consciousness does not die when the body does. Tibetan Buddhism teaches that the moment of death is not an ending but a doorway to transformation. The book provides a structured guide on how to navigate this transition and break free from the cycle of rebirth. Western scientists studying consciousness now ask whether there is evidence that the mind can exist beyond the brain, a question that this text has addressed for centuries. Could it be that this book, once thought to be just religious folklore, holds insights into the very fabric of existence? Near-death experiences, a modern parallel to ancient teachings. One of the most compelling reasons the Tibetan Book of the Dead remains relevant today is that its descriptions of the afterlife closely resemble modern near-death experiences. People who have been revived after clinical death report a bright, blinding light that feels peaceful and all-encompassing. Encounters with divine beings who offer guidance and insight. A sense of floating outside the body, watching events unfold. A moment of deep clarity, where past actions and emotions are revealed. Each of these matches the Bardos described in the Tibetan Book of the Dead, stages of consciousness that one moves through after death. The book teaches that if a person is aware enough to recognize these experiences as projections of their own mind, they can achieve enlightenment. If not, they will be drawn back into the cycle of reincarnation. Could these accounts of NDEs be glimpses into the very process described in the book? And if so, what does it mean for how we prepare for death, and how we live our lives? Why this knowledge is more important than ever. The teachings of the Tibetan Book of the Dead are not just spiritual philosophy, they are practical insights into the nature of life and death. If the book's descriptions align with what people experience in NDEs, and if modern science is beginning to explore the idea of consciousness existing beyond the brain, then these ancient teachings may be more relevant today than ever before. What if death is not an end, but a transition that can be navigated with awareness? What if training the mind now could change what happens in that final moment? What if understanding death is the key to truly understanding life? As science continues to search for answers, the Tibetan Book of the Dead offer. Death is not an abrupt ending, it is a transition. The Tibetan Book of the Dead describes what happens when we take our last breath, breaking the process down into 3 major bardos, transitional states that determine the soul's journey. Each bardo offers a choice. One can either recognize the nature of reality and achieve liberation, or fall into confusion, leading to another cycle of rebirth. Awareness is key, and preparation in life determines how one navigates these stages. Let's break down each bardo and uncover what truly happens after death. The first bardo, the moment of death. At the moment of death, the body ceases to function, but consciousness remains. This is the first and most critical opportunity for liberation. Tibetan teachings describe this stage as the unveiling of the clear light, the ultimate reality beyond illusion. The appearance of the clear light. The dying person experiences a blinding, radiant light that is beyond human perception. This light is not external, it is the purest form of consciousness itself, revealed once the distractions of the physical world fade. If the individual recognizes this light as their true nature, they can merge with it and attain enlightenment, escaping the cycle of reincarnation forever. Why most people fail to recognize it? The light is overwhelming, and for those untrained in awareness, it feels foreign or frightening. Instead of embracing it, most people instinctively retreat due to fear or attachment to their former life. As the light fades, consciousness moves into the second bardo, where visions begin to manifest. For those who have trained their mind in life, through meditation, mindfulness, and spiritual practice, this moment of recognition can be instantaneous liberation. But for the unprepared, the journey continues. The second bardo, visions of the mind. For those who fail to recognize the clear light, the second Bardo unfolds, a state of extraordinary visions. This is where one's own mind projects experiences that can either be blissful or terrifying. Encounters with peaceful and wrathful beings. The dying person will witness peaceful deities radiating light and compassion. If these beings are recognized as projections of one's own enlightened nature, liberation is still possible. However, if the person does not realize this, the visions intensify, shifting into wrathful deities, fearsome entities with terrifying appearances. The truth behind the wrathful beings. These terrifying figures are not external demons, they are reflections of the mind's fears, attachments, and unresolved emotions. The purpose of these encounters is not punishment but self-confrontation, forcing the individual to see what remains hidden in their subconscious. If one recognizes them as aspects of their own mind, they dissolve, and liberation is still possible. The psychological connection. Carl Jung, the renowned psychologist, drew parallels between these teachings and his theory of archetypes, universal symbols buried in the human psyche. Just as Jung suggested that dreams reveal aspects of the unconscious mind, the Tibetan teachings describe the second Bardo as a dreamlike state that exposes the soul's deepest truths. The deities are mirrors, showing the individual everything they have suppressed or ignored. If one is able to face these visions with understanding, they can still escape the cycle of reincarnation. But for those who react with fear, confusion, or attachment, the journey moves forward into the third Bardo. The third Bardo, the path to rebirth. For those who have not achieved liberation in the first two Bardos, the third Bardo presents a final transition, one that determines the next incarnation. How rebirth is decided. The mind, stripped of the physical body, is now a pure energy force, drawn toward different realms based on past actions, emotions, and karma. Every desire, fear, and attachment begins to pull consciousness toward a new life. The Tibetan text describes visions of different worlds and beings, each representing a potential future existence. The influence of karma. Tibetan Buddhism teaches that every action in life leaves an imprint that influences what happens next. If one has cultivated wisdom and compassion, they may be drawn to a higher realm or even a human rebirth that allows for further spiritual growth. If one has lived a life of greed, hatred, or ignorance, they may be pulled toward a lower existence, perhaps even an existence of suffering. How to prepare for this moment? The key to avoiding an uncontrolled rebirth is awareness, maintaining clarity in life so that at the moment of death, one is not blindly pulled by past habits and desires. Tibetan monks spend their lives training to remain conscious and in control during this Bardo, allowing them to choose their next existence with intention. For those who do not recognize the illusion of rebirth, the cycle begins again. They are pulled into a new life, their past forgotten, their soul once again bound to the wheel of samsara. But for those who have prepared, the opportunity for freedom remains open. The Bardos, a roadmap to death and life. The three Bardos are not just a map of what happens after death, they are also a reflection of the transitions we experience in life. Every major change, whether it be the loss of a loved one, the end of a relationship, or even a personal transformation, is a form of a Bardo. Recognizing these moments in life can help us navigate the ultimate transition of death with greater awareness. Tibetan teachings suggest that life itself is a preparation for the Bardos, and those who cultivate awareness now will not be caught in confusion later. Understanding these stages changes everything. It shifts the way we think about death, making it not something to fear, but something to train for. It reminds us that the way we live shapes what happens after we die. Death is not the only transition we experience. The Bardos, as described in the Tibetan Book of the Dead, do not apply only to what happens after our last breath, they are present throughout life. Every moment of uncertainty, change, or transformation is a Bardo, a state where the old dissolves and the new emerges. The key to navigating the afterlife is the same key to navigating life itself, awareness. If we can recognize these moments of transition in everyday life, we can train our minds to remain calm, clear, and prepared for the ultimate transition, death. But how can we apply this ancient wisdom to our modern existence? Recognizing the Bardos in everyday life. Tibetan teachings suggest that we are constantly moving through bardos. Even now, in this moment, you may be in one. Moments of uncertainty, when faced with a major decision, when the future is unclear, or when everything you once knew is shifting, you are in a bardo. Life-altering changes, the end of a relationship, the loss of a loved one, a career shift, or any major transformation mirrors the transition from one bardo to the next. States of deep awareness, when fully immersed in creativity, meditation, or moments of pure presence, you touch the bardo of visions, where clarity beyond the ordinary world is revealed. By recognizing these transitions in life, we prepare ourselves for the ultimate transition, the moment of death. Using the bardos as a guide for growth. Instead of fearing change, the Tibetan Book of the Dead teaches us to embrace it. Every bardo offers a chance for transformation. The same principles that help one navigate the afterlife can help us face challenges, uncertainty, and suffering in this life. Facing fear with awareness, just as the dead face terrifying visions in the Bardo of Visions, we too face fears in life. Whether it's fear of failure, rejection, or the unknown, recognizing that these fears are projections of our own mind allows us to move through them without being consumed. Detachment from the past, in the Bardo of Death, one must let go of their previous identity to move forward. In life, we often cling to past experiences, relationships, or identities, even when they no longer serve us. Letting go is essential for transformation. Embracing change as an opportunity, instead of resisting change, we can see it as a natural part of life's cycle, just as death is followed by rebirth in the Bardo of Rebirth. Every ending is a new beginning. The way we respond to the bardos in life reflects how we will respond at the moment of death. If we train ourselves to remain conscious and present through life's challenges, we will be more prepared for the transitions of the afterlife. Practical techniques for living with awareness. The Buddhist masters who studied the Tibetan Book of the Dead did not wait until death to prepare, they trained their minds daily. Here are 3 key practices to cultivate awareness, clarity, and fearlessness. 1. Mindfulness and meditation. Practicing mindfulness helps us recognize bardos in real time. Meditation trains the mind to remain aware during moments of transition, whether in life or after death. Developing stillness allows us to observe emotions, fears, and thoughts without being controlled by them. 2. Letting go of attachments. Death is the ultimate act of letting go, and life constantly asks us to practice this skill. Releasing attachment to identity, material possessions, and past experiences allows us to move through bardos without fear. Acknowledging impermanence reminds us that nothing is permanent, not joy, not suffering, and not even life itself. 3. Cultivating compassion and awareness of others. Tibetan Buddhism teaches that selflessness dissolves fear. The more we focus on others, the less we suffer. Practicing Tunglen, breathing in suffering and breathing out love, prepares the heart for both life and death. Recognizing the bardos in others' lives helps us support them in their own transitions. By applying these principles, we not only prepare for death, but transform the way we live. The bardos as a path to freedom. The bardos are not meant to be feared, they are opportunities. Every moment of uncertainty, every challenge, and every transition is a chance for awakening. Whether in life or after death, awareness is the key to liberation. Instead of resisting change, we can meet it with clarity. Instead of fearing the unknown, we can train ourselves to face it with calmness. The teachings of the Tibetan Book of the Dead remind us that the way we live is the way we will die, and the way we die shapes what comes next. The teachings of the Tibetan Book of the Dead are not just about death, they are a guide for life. Tibetan Buddhist masters have long understood that the way we prepare for death determines what happens after. Through specific spiritual practices, one can cultivate awareness, dissolve fear, and gain mastery over the bardos. These techniques are designed to train the mind, allowing it to remain clear, focused, and fearless in the face of death. More importantly, they transform daily life, leading to a deeper sense of peace, purpose, and spiritual awakening. Meditation on impermanence, embracing life's fleeting nature. One of the core teachings of Tibetan Buddhism is impermanence, the understanding that everything in life is temporary. Just as the seasons change, so do our experiences, emotions, and even our bodies. Nothing is permanent, not even death. How this practice works. Every morning, monks meditate on the temporary nature of existence, reminding themselves that this very moment will never come again. They reflect on how every breath, every experience, and every relationship is constantly changing. This daily meditation cultivates a deep acceptance of death, eliminating the fear that grips most people when they face it. The benefits of meditation on impermanence. Clarity in life choices. When you understand that life is fleeting, you begin to focus only on what truly matters. Freedom from attachment. By recognizing that nothing lasts forever, you naturally let go of the need to control everything. Fearlessness in death. If you have spent your life embracing impermanence, the moment of death will not feel like a terrifying loss, but a natural transition. This practice serves as a daily reminder that life is precious, and that by accepting its fleeting nature, we can live with greater presence and awareness. Tunglen, compassion meditation to dissolve fear and ego. Another powerful Tibetan practice is Tunglen, which translates to giving and receiving. It is a meditation technique that transforms suffering into compassion and cultivates selflessness, qualities that help both in life and in the afterlife. How this practice works. During meditation, the practitioner breathes in suffering, both their own and that of others. With each inhale, they take in pain, fear, and negativity. On the exhale, they breathe out love, healing, and compassion, sending relief to all beings. The purpose of Tunglen. In Tibetan Buddhism, fear of death is deeply linked to attachment to the self. The ego clings to existence, creating anxiety. By practicing Tunglen, one dissolves the illusion of self, realizing that suffering is universal and interconnected. The more one trains in compassion, the less fear they experience when facing their own mortality. The benefits of Tunglen. Transforms fear into courage. When you embrace suffering, it no longer controls you. Prepares you for the afterlife. In the Bardo of visions, encountering frightening deities is common. If you have trained in compassion, you recognize these as projections of your own mind and do not retreat in fear. Breaks the cycle of karma. Selfless actions purify negative karma, allowing for a smoother transition after death. By breathing in suffering and exhaling love, Tunglen prepares the heart and mind for both the challenges of life and the moment of death. Mantras and consciousness transference, aligning the mind with higher awareness. The mind is constantly influenced by thoughts, emotions, and external distractions. To navigate the Bardos successfully, Tibetan Buddhist masters use mantras and energy transference techniques to stabilize consciousness. Sacred mantras, tuning the mind to higher frequencies. Mantras are sacred sounds or phrases that create a vibrational shift in the mind. The repetition of mantras clears mental distractions and aligns consciousness with higher states of awareness. The most well-known Tibetan Buddhist mantra is Om Mani Padme Hum, a chant associated with compassion and enlightenment. How mantras help in death. During the dying process, chanting or listening to mantras stabilizes the mind, preventing panic or confusion. The vibrations of sacred sounds create a bridge to the divine realms, helping the soul transition smoothly through the Bardos. Even in daily life, chanting mantras can reduce anxiety, improve focus, and cultivate inner peace. Consciousness transference, Phawa preparing for a smooth transition. Phawa is an advanced Tibetan practice where, at the moment of death, one transfers their consciousness to a higher state of existence. It involves visualizing energy moving through the crown of the head, directing the soul toward enlightenment. Tibetan monks often practice Phawa for years, ensuring that when the moment of death arrives, they can guide their consciousness to a pure and awakened state. This practice is considered one of the most powerful techniques for achieving a peaceful and controlled transition beyond death. For those untrained in Phawa, monks and spiritual guides may assist, reciting prayers or chanting near the dying person, helping their consciousness move toward a higher realm. Lucid dying, training the mind for the moment of death. One of the core teachings of the Tibetan Book of the Dead is that the mind must remain aware and present at the moment of death to recognize the clear light and achieve liberation. Tibetan masters train for this through lucid dreaming and deep meditation. lucid dreaming as a training ground for death. Tibetan monks practice dream yoga, which trains them to remain conscious while dreaming. The logic is simple: if one can stay aware in a dream, where the mind creates illusions, they can also stay aware in death, where similar illusions appear in the Bardos. By practicing lucid dreaming, one learns to navigate dreamlike realms with control, mirroring the process of guiding one's consciousness in death. Meditation on the clear light. Before sleep, practitioners meditate on pure awareness, training the mind to recognize emptiness and clarity. The goal is to create familiarity with the clear light so that when it appears at death, it is recognized instantly. This practice reduces confusion and increases the chance of achieving enlightenment in the first Bardo. By training in lucid dreaming and meditation, one develops the ability to remain calm, conscious, and aware during life's greatest transition, death. The path to fearless awareness. The teachings of the Tibetan Book of the Dead remind us that death is not the enemy, it is a gateway to liberation. But to cross that gateway with clarity, we must train the mind now. Meditation on impermanence allows us to accept the fleeting nature of life. Tonglen teaches us compassion and selflessness, breaking the chains of fear and attachment. Mantras and consciousness transference align the mind with higher realms, ensuring a peaceful transition. Lucid dreaming and meditation on the clear light prepare us to recognize and embrace the ultimate truth at the moment of death. These are not just spiritual exercises. They are mental preparations for the greatest journey of all. Death is one of the most universal human experiences, yet different cultures approach it in profoundly different ways. In the West, death is often seen as a tragic, feared, and avoided topic, something to be managed clinically rather than understood spiritually. In contrast, Tibetan Buddhism embraces death as a natural and transformative transition. It is not something to be feared, but an opportunity for liberation and enlightenment. At the core of this approach is the Tibetan Book of the Dead, Bardo Thödol, a sacred text read aloud to the dying to guide their consciousness through the afterlife. This practice reflects a deeper cultural philosophy: death is not an end, but a journey, and the way one prepares for it determines what comes next. Death as a conscious transition in Tibetan culture. In Tibetan Buddhism, death is not treated as a medical event, but as a deeply spiritual process. The teachings emphasize that the moment of death is the most significant transition a person will experience. With proper training, one can navigate death consciously, making choices about their next existence. If the dying person recognizes the clear light of consciousness, they can achieve liberation from the cycle of rebirth. For this reason, Tibetans do not ignore death or treat it with fear, they prepare for it throughout their lives. Meditation, spiritual practice, and mindful living are seen as training for the final moment, ensuring that when death arrives, it is met with clarity and awareness rather than confusion and fear. The role of the Bardo Thödol, Tibetan Book of the Dead. One of the most distinctive elements of the Tibetan approach to death is the reading of the Bardo Thödol to the dying. This is not a ritual of mourning, but a practical guide to help the individual navigate the afterlife. How the Bardo Thödol helps the dying. It describes each stage of the Bardo, explaining what the person will experience. It reminds the soul that the visions they encounter are projections of their own mind, preventing them from reacting with fear. It encourages them to recognize the clear light and embrace enlightenment instead of reincarnation. Monks, family members, or spiritual guides sit by the dying person's side, reading the text for 49 days, the traditional period in which consciousness is believed to transition through the Bardos. The goal is to keep the mind focused, fearless, and prepared for the journey ahead. Even after death, these readings continue, as Tibetan Buddhism teaches that the soul can still hear and be influenced by words spoken to it. This belief reflects an understanding that consciousness does not instantly disappear at death, but moves through different states before reaching its next destination. The Western fear of death, avoidance and denial. In stark contrast to Tibetan practices, Western society largely avoids and medicalizes death. It is seen as a failure of medicine rather than a natural part of life. Death is hidden away, people die in hospitals or hospices, far removed from family and community. Grief is rushed, funerals are short, and the topic of death is often ignored or considered taboo. No spiritual preparation. Unlike Tibetans, who prepare for death their entire lives, Westerners often face it unprepared and full of fear. This avoidance leads to deep anxiety around mortality, making death something to resist rather than accept. Many people die unconscious, sedated, or disconnected from their final moments, missing the opportunity for spiritual clarity. This cultural difference raises an important question: what if embracing death, rather than fearing it, could change the way we live? What Tibetan wisdom teaches us about living without fear? Tibetan Buddhism suggests that preparing for death makes life more meaningful. By accepting mortality and practicing awareness, one can live with greater purpose. Knowing that life is temporary encourages people to focus on what truly matters. Reduce fear and anxiety. When death is seen as a transition, not an end, fear fades. Approach the end with clarity. A prepared mind will not struggle or panic in the final moments, but will face death with peace and understanding. This wisdom offers a radical rethinking of life itself. If we prepare for death, we can truly learn how to live. The question is, will we continue to avoid death, or will we embrace it as our greatest teacher? For centuries, the nature of consciousness has been one of the greatest mysteries of human existence. Is consciousness simply a function of the brain, ceasing when the body dies? Or does it exist beyond physical form, continuing after death? The Tibetan Book of the Dead presents a radical idea, that consciousness does not die with the body but moves through different realms of existence. This idea has long been considered spiritual philosophy, yet modern science, particularly in the fields of neuroscience and quantum physics, is beginning to ask similar questions. Could ancient Tibetan wisdom hold the key to understanding what happens after we die? The scientific study of consciousness, a mystery unsolved. Despite enormous advancements in brain research, scientists still do not fully understand consciousness. Neuroscience can map brain activity and explain how different regions of the brain are responsible for memory, thought, and emotions. However, science cannot explain what consciousness actually is, why we have subjective experiences, or what happens to awareness when the brain shuts down. Some researchers believe consciousness is merely a product of brain activity, while others suggest that it exists independently of the brain, much like a signal to a receiver. This second idea, that consciousness may be non-local, echoes the teachings of the Tibetan Book of the Dead. Tibetan Buddhism has long described consciousness as something that transcends physical form, continuing even after death. If this is true, could science one day prove what Tibetan masters have claimed for centuries? Near-death experiences and the Tibetan Bardos. One of the most compelling areas of research that aligns with Tibetan teachings is the study of near-death experiences, NDEs. NDEs occur when a person is declared clinically dead, heart stopped, brain activity flatlined, but is later revived. Many people report experiencing the following: a brilliant, all-encompassing light, similar to the clear light described in the first Bardo. A sense of floating outside the body, watching events unfold below, suggesting consciousness may exist outside the brain. Encounters with spiritual beings or deceased relatives, which aligns with the second Bardo's visions. A profound sense of peace and unity, as if they had touched a deeper reality. These experiences mirror the transitions described in the Tibetan Book of the Dead. In both cases, consciousness appears to continue even after clinical death, encountering different realms or dimensions. Some scientists argue that these experiences are hallucinations caused by a dying brain, yet many NDEs occur when brain activity has completely stopped, raising the question, how can a non-functioning brain produce such detailed and vivid experiences? This is where the link between science and Tibetan wisdom becomes undeniable. Quantum physics and the nature of reality. Beyond neuroscience, quantum physics is also raising questions that support Tibetan perspectives on consciousness. The observer effect. Quantum experiments show that the mere act of observing something changes its behavior, suggesting that consciousness itself affects reality. Tibetan Buddhism teaches that our perception shapes the world, much like the deities in the Bardo of visions are projections of our own mind. Quantum entanglement. Particles that are entangled remain connected, even across vast distances, responding instantly to changes in one another. This has led some scientists to propose that consciousness, like quantum entanglement, may not be confined to the brain but exist beyond space and time. This aligns with Tibetan teachings that consciousness is not localized but exists in a vast, interconnected reality. While quantum mechanics does not yet prove that consciousness survives death, it challenges the idea that reality is purely physical, opening the door to possibilities long suggested in Tibetan philosophy. Could Tibetan teachings be a roadmap to consciousness? As science advances, more researchers are beginning to explore the possibility that Tibetan wisdom contains insights that modern technology is only beginning to uncover. Some scientists now propose that consciousness is fundamental to reality, not just a product of the brain. Studies of meditation and Tibetan practices show that experienced practitioners can alter their brainwaves, demonstrating a level of control over consciousness that science cannot yet explain. NDEs and quantum mechanics increasingly support the idea that awareness exists beyond the body, just as the Tibetan Book of the Dead describes. For centuries, the book has provided a detailed map of what happens after death. Now, science is catching up, asking the same questions and finding evidence that consciousness may not end with the body. Could the answers that modern researchers seek have been hidden in ancient Tibetan wisdom all along? The mystery of consciousness remains unsolved, but one thing is certain: the more we learn, the closer we come to proving what Tibetan masters have known for centuries. Chapter 8: Final Thoughts, Living with Awareness, Dying with Peace. Throughout history, humanity has feared death, seeing it as the ultimate unknown. But the Tibetan Book of the Dead offers a completely different perspective, one that views death not as an end, but as a transition. More than that, it teaches that by preparing for death, we actually learn how to live more fully. This ancient text is not just a guide for the dying, it is a wake-up call for the living. It reminds us that every moment is fleeting, every experience is temporary, and every transition, whether in life or in death, is an opportunity for awakening. Throughout history, humanity has feared death, seeing it as the ultimate unknown. But the Tibetan Book of the Dead offers a completely different perspective, one that views death not as an end, but as a transition. More than that, it teaches that by preparing for death, we actually learn how to live more fully. This ancient text is not just a guide for the dying, it is a wake-up call for the living. It reminds us that every moment is fleeting, every experience is temporary, and every transition, whether in life or in death, is an opportunity for awakening. The question is, how will we use this knowledge? Every transition in life is a bardo. One of the most profound insights of the Tibetan Book of the Dead is that the bardos, the transitional states we move through after death, are also present in life. Every moment of uncertainty, change, or transformation is a mini-death, a chance to awaken. The ending of a relationship, the loss of a job, or even a moment of deep self-reflection, each of these is a bardo, requiring the same awareness that will guide us after death. If we train ourselves to recognize and embrace transitions in life, we will be better prepared to navigate the transition of death with clarity and peace. Rather than fearing change, we must see it as an opportunity to grow, to let go of old patterns, and to awaken to the deeper reality of existence. Breaking free from unconscious patterns. Most people go through life trapped in unconscious habits, reacting to emotions, chasing temporary desires, and avoiding the difficult truths of impermanence. But Tibetan wisdom teaches that awareness is the key to liberation. If we learn to see our fears, desires, and attachments as projections of our own mind, we can begin to break free from them. If we understand that nothing in life is permanent, we stop clinging to things that will inevitably change. If we practice meditation, mindfulness, and compassion, we develop the ability to remain calm and aware, no matter what transitions we face. The more we cultivate conscious awareness in life, the more prepared we will be to face death, not as an end, but as a journey to something greater. Embracing death to unlock a life of purpose. What if death was not something to be feared, but something that could teach us how to live? When we accept that our time here is limited, we stop wasting it on things that do not matter. When we embrace the truth that everything changes, we learn to live in the present moment. When we prepare for death with awareness, we unlock a deep inner peace that transforms how we experience life. The greatest lesson of the Tibetan Book of the Dead is not just about death, it is about how to live with meaning, clarity, and purpose. By facing death with open eyes, we awaken to the truth: life is precious. Every moment is an opportunity. The time to awaken is now. The final question. Now that you have explored these teachings, one question remains. How will you live, knowing that one day you will die? Will you live in fear, avoiding the truth of impermanence? Or will you embrace life fully, preparing for death as the greatest journey of all? The choice is yours.